RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, opinions, statements, or anything else from its guests or advertisers. This information contains not responsible for the views, actions, opinions, statements, or anything else from its guests or advertisers. Sorry, I had an audio glitch there. The information contained in this program is not to be construed as medical or legal advice, and as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News for Saturday Night Livestream. Happy 4th of July, everyone. I hope you're having a lovely evening. Our guest tonight is author, radio host, all-around great guy, Brooks Agnew. We're going to be talking specifically, among other things, about his new book, Charm of Favor. It is a fictionalized account of the Clinton crime syndicate. You're really going to like it. Do me a favor, everyone, please give me a like and a share on this broadcast. Help us break through the algorithm. All right, everyone, please do me a favor. Sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. A new bill in Washington is trying to invade your privacy. It's called the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act, and if it gets passed, it's going to mean the end for warrant-proof encryption, meaning that both you and I won't have the privacy that we need from the government, even if we're using encrypted data. And that's why I do everything I can to ensure my privacy online, which means always keeping my VPN turned on. Because using a VPN hides my location online, it stops advertisers from creating a profile about me, and it allows me to surf the web anonymously. Plus, as an added bonus, if I get to a YouTube video that's blocked in my country, with just a click of the mouse, I can change my virtual location to any country I want, allowing me to get past any blocked videos. And that works for other video streaming service sites as well. I only use Virtual Shield VPN because Virtual Shield is built from the ground up specifically for privacy and protection. It's fast, reliable, and secure, and it's available on all iPhone and Android devices. Let me show you guys how easy it is. Alright, so here we are. We'll go to what is my IP. You can see it's right there. Now, when I connect to Virtual Shield, that will mask my actual location, and it now shows that I am here in Chicago, Illinois, and my location is secure. This month, I've partnered exclusively with Virtual Shield to give my audience 50% off any VPN plan on their website, including all their premium add-ons, including Protection Plus, Residential Access, and VIP performance plans. Now, if you go to virtualshield.com/redpill78, you can start protecting yourself and your online identity today. Or you can go to the link in the description or the pinned comment, and remember, when you support my sponsors, you directly support this channel. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please join me in welcoming my guest for this evening, Brooks Agnew. Brooks, how are you, my friend?
I am doing fine, sir. Good to be on your program. I'm a big fan.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of yours as well. I mentioned we're going to be talking about Charm of Favor, but just in case we have anybody in the audience who isn't familiar with your work, tell us, how did you get started as an author?
I started writing when I was 15 years old, just creative writing class. I created a story called Black Cars Are Faster, which was a story of that where I grew up in Pasadena, California, about two cars going out to race on Colorado Boulevard. And it got published, so I got 4 cents a word out of it. I was hooked, so I started writing articles, and I've written over 10,000 technical articles and magazine articles, and I had somebody approach me in 2004. I have an idea for a book. I said, really? What about? And they said, well, it's about the creation and destiny of the earth. And it kind of fascinated me because I had a degree in chemistry and I was working on a PhD in physics at the time. So the creation stories fascinated me, and I was an aficionado of ancient cultures anyway. And she handed me a drawing and said, what do you think this is? And I looked at it, I said, well, it kind of looks like a particle accelerator. She said, it does to me too, but it was drawn 5,000 years ago by the Babylonians. I went, okay, you have my interest. So we started researching, started writing. It took us about 3 years to finish the first book. It was 560 pages long. It had an enormous bibliography, and when we turned it into the publisher, they said, this book is too big. We can't publish it. You're going to have to cut it down. So we reduced it by about 100 pages and decided to start on the second volume. Well, I kind of thought my co-author's name was E.J. Clark. And I said, you buy 5 copies and I'll buy 5 copies. We'll give them to our friends and we'll say, hey, we're authors. We did it. We wrote a book. We did not know that there was this culture out there of people who were really interested in correlating all these ancient cultures and what they thought about planet Earth. Mm-hmm. And the book went to number 38 on Barnes & Noble, and we made a ton of money on that book. So we were hooked. We wrote volume 2 and 3. And then about 2 years later, we wrote volume 4. So it's a 4-volume set, 2,000 pages. And it's used in some universities as textbooks, the whole set.
Wow.
So at the end of it all, there was kind of a little bit of doom and gloom, like the whole 2012 thing and Earth coming to an end and the end of the age and the solar cycle. And it was all, there was no way out. There was no escape for humanity, according to the ancient cultures. But what I noticed throughout time is there were moments where humanity decided to choose a new future. Mm-hmm. They already knew the future that was recorded by the prophets. They already had that in their hands. And they didn't like that future. So they chose another one. And you see these sort of kinks in the timeline of humanity. And one in particular caught my attention, which was today. In 1776, July 4th. Somehow those very intelligent men, colonists from Britain or descendants thereof, knew the future of Armageddon. They knew where everything was going. The whole world was ruled by one man for thousands of years with wooden ships. One emperor or another king. There was no choice. There was no freedom of speech. There was no getting to choose what you want to do for a living. That didn't exist anywhere. So they didn't like that future of marching inexorably to Armageddon, and they decided to create a new one. Let's create a new country. This time we'll base it on God's laws, and we'll say people have the right to speak, and they have the right to defend that speech with a gun, and other rights that go with it. And lo and behold, a war later, a constitutional Congress later, we have a republic, if we can keep it. Mm. And what happened? For 244 years, I call them the Global Syndicate. The mm-hmm. Global Syndicate's been trying to get their planet back. Because the one thing, and I love the Bible, I love reading the old prophets of various traditions, but none of them saw America, the greatest, richest, most powerful country the world has ever known, and they didn't see it. It told me that prophecy is a conditional prediction. This is what's going to happen if you keep doing this. Mm. This is what's going to happen if you don't stop doing this, So we chose something else. We chose a different future. We are now on a totally different timeline. And that global syndicate, which is led, I think, by a very dark power, wants to return Earth to the original timeline. And that's the battle. Mm. Those are all the wars. Those are all the psyops and everything that we've been going through for the last 244 years. And what Charm My Favor is a story of a fictional family called the Russo family and their the mother and 4 kids, and the father's had a stroke, so he's kind of a casualty of the previous book. How they deal with this espionage and the layers of skullduggery that are inside our government, not foreign powers, but powers inside our own agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations that we're at war with.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know that. They don't know that in the Pentagon, it isn't all unity.
Mm-hmm.
There are factions that are fighting each other inside that building, real fighting.
Mm-hmm. Now, Brooks, what is your history with the government? Were you in the military yourself, or were you at any point employed by the government, so it gave you an inside edge?
When I was in the 8th grade, I was one of the top math students in the state of California, and a newspaper came to interview me, which I thought was pretty cool. They asked me a bunch of questions and asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up and all that stuff. But since that time, I have always wanted to go to college and learn as much as I could learn, but I came from a working poor family. So I decided the only way that I was going to make that happen was to enlist in the service, get the GI Bill, get out, and use that GI Bill to go to college. So that's what I did. In 1973, I entered the Air Force. I enlisted because at that time they were still drafting people.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to my permanent duty station was, as I said, the tropical paradise of Grand Forks, North Dakota. I was, when I went there, they said, well, what do you want to do? Your scores are off the charts. Anything you want to do. I said, give me the hardest electronics course you have. So that's what I did. And I got a degree in electronics engineering, came out of there, went into college, took chemistry, and slugged my way through that on the dean's list, and graduated with honors with a degree in chemistry. And I've been working in industry ever since. But in that industry, I've had interactions with the federal government on an agency level, getting grants,
Mm-hmm.
testifying, for different projects and things like that. It was an amazing experience, and I got to see government work on the inside from a congressional level. I never ran for office. I was a delegate once, but I never ran for office, didn't want to, but I had a lot of friends that did, and they counted on me for technical information.
All right, that's cool. Now, at what point did you realize that there was this secret level of control taking place in the government and various agencies? What was it that kind of turned you onto that?
In 2009, I invented and patented the nation's first 100% electric pickup truck.
Ooh.
So I thought this will really be great. Everyone will like it. And they had a thing called the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Fund. It was $23.5 billion put together by Barack Hussein Obama. So I said, you know what? He's singing my song. I'm going to go to Washington. I'm going to get a grant and start this truck into manufacturing. So I did. And wow, did I get my eyes opened. Because every time I made a presentation, if it was to the Department of Transportation with 400 businessmen in the audience, if it was to a 23-member council of Congress, or inside the Pentagon with representatives from all 4 branches of the military, because this would be a great truck for military bases, I got all ears until it got to the point where we were actually going to go into production. Then I saw a different animal come out. Then I saw active blocking of the project, blocking of funding, blocking of approvals. I couldn't believe it at first. I thought maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I'm filling out the paperwork wrong, or I'm not saying things right, or I don't wear my suit right or something. But no. It was something way deeper than that. I was speaking with then Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood in front of an audience. And I said, Mr. Secretary, I just have a question. I want to know why the Department of Transportation would not allow an independent company to create a truck that the major car makers don't want to make, but the public wants. I have demand for this truck. And he said, why don't you just buy a GM? Why don't you just go buy a Volt? And I said, well, I'm in a different market. I want to build electric pickup trucks. I want to know why you won't support it.
Mm.
He said, because they made the investment. And I said, well, with all due respect, Mr. Secretary, actually, we made the investment and we didn't get paid back. And he stood up to his full 6'4", turned to the audience, and said, thank you very much for coming to Washington. And he left. And that was the end of that. So that's why we don't have electric trucks in America, right there, because the major car makers aren't going to make them. There's no win for them. Why would they make an electric truck that they already make a gas-powered truck that they make tons of money on that truck would replace? They're not ever going to do it, and they're not going to allow us to do it either.
You know, to that point, the only thing that's even close was the recently previewed Tesla electric truck. And it's kind of an abomination, really, when you look at it. I mean, it's a very strange design. And when Elon Musk brought it out, he was touting all these different features, and the windows are supposed to be shatter resistant. And the first thing that somebody did was break the windows with a steel ball bearing. Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't quite sure at that time, you know, were they attempting to make it look shoddy so that people wouldn't want it? You know, nobody would want to buy this truck?
It is a truck, but it's kind of a sport truck, kind of a, like you said, a conversation piece. And what I designed was a truck that was a work truck. That you could put anything on the bed, and the municipalities love this truck. So we're in two different markets altogether.
Right.
And there are others that are trying to do it. But what is their claim to fame? It'll go 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. Who needs a pickup truck that goes 0 to 60 in 5 seconds?
Especially if you're tugging a load.
Well, yeah, and that by the time you get to second gear, you're breaking every traffic law that was ever written.
Right.
The ATVM, the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Fund, that $23.5 billion. I was talking to the undersecretary, and I asked him, what's up with this ATVM fund? Why can't we access this $23.5 billion? And he said, oh, all that money's been earmarked for General Motors when they come out of bankruptcy. That's what we were up against.
Wow.
Oh, it made great PR for them. They could come out and say, oh, we're supporting small business, and we have this great technology fund, and we're, pushing for new innovation. But it was all a payoff for General Motors.
That's insane. So how long was that experience? Was that over and done, or did you waste a significant portion of your life trying to get it to work?
I went through $1.5 million. And it is now 2020 for those of you watching. So that's been 11 years since 2009. And I had another meeting on it last week. So we never give up. We're hoping that with the Trump administration, there's a new era for small business. We've managed, 13 of our competitors are already bankrupt. But we managed to stay alive and debt free. And fortunately, I'm still feeding money into the company, keeping it alive. So we still have 2 operating prototypes, and we give test drives about every month.
That's awesome. Is there any place people can go online to see these prototypes in action?
Yes, absolutely.
Where at?
My website, it is ev-fleet.com, ev-fleet.com. There are videos there, write-ups there, specs there, all kinds of testimonies there, and you can learn everything you need to know about the electric pickup truck.
That is amazing. I think that is so cool. And, honestly, Brooks, I think that you hopefully should have much better luck here under the Trump administration. I mean, how did that meeting go the other day?
It went pretty well. We're actually talking to some money raisers out of Las Vegas. Not too much investment money in the United States right now. During transition after the election, I went to Trump Tower to speak to, if I could, President Trump or somebody under him about the Department of Energy. And at that time, they didn't have a secretary chosen. I made it as far as Steve Bannon's secretary. And they had my resume because I'd sent it in before. And they said they already had somebody that they had in mind for the Secretary of Energy. And I said, look, that's fine. I just want to be here. I just want any way that I can support you and show you how this can be done. And, it didn't fall on deaf ears, but that place was a madhouse before the inauguration. I went up January of this year, and it was much more organized, much calmer. I got this really cool hat, Space Force hat, up there at Trump Tower.
It's great.
And I find a lot more synergy now. But in President Trump's first term, he had no choice but to deal with what he calls winners. He's looking for people that have already done it. They already have the money. They're already ready to go, shovel ready, more or less. The second term, we're going to look for this small business engine to be turned on.
All right. Now, well, once you had that experience in Washington and it became obvious that it was just a swamp of corruption, if you will, did that send you down the road researching other subjects to see just how much corruption existed there in Washington, or did it just...
I had my own experience with it, but obviously being an avid writer, being an avid podcaster myself, I got exposed to a lot of loose threads. And one doesn't have to be really attentive to see a trail of dead bodies. Every few days, every few weeks, another person commits suicide or gets offed or dies of a heart attack or a plane crash, or et cetera, et cetera. And it all seems to center around the Clintons and the people that know them. And that is so obvious even to a casual observer. I know a lot of people. I'm 65 years old. I've spoken to hundreds of thousands of people live. I don't know anyone that's been killed. No one. I know people that die of old age or pneumonia or something like that, but nothing. These people have something following them, or they do something that we're not aware of. And in fact, when I was writing the book Charm of Favor, it started out to be quite a struggle to pull all this information together. And we got to about chapter 4, chapter 5, and my editor was trying to get me to get all these details correct, which I did. And she said, we got to come up with a name for the book. I can't think of one yet. I don't know. It's like a Trumplican fantasy. I didn't know what to call it. And we were watching James Comey Chameleon testifying before the Senate, and he was lying. And we knew he was lying. And the crazy thing is, they knew he was lying. And I said, wow, how does he do that? How does he just, well, I'm not going to answer that. Well, I'll be happy to tell you about that. And then he lies. And she said, it's so strange. It's like he has a charm of favor on him. I said, what's a charm of favor? She said, it's in witchcraft. What'll happen is witches will put a charm of favor on someone before they're going to go to court or go be investigated or, go before the Senate committee. And everything they say is just fine. Everyone in the room is just mesmerized by the sound of their voice. And I said, that's it. That's the name of the book, Charm of Favor.
That's definitely it. I mean, considering all of the various illegal activities that the Clintons have been involved in, every single person in their direct orbit, everything that they've done, to think that they've gone so far in politics, so far here in America and across the globe, and up until this point, nothing has specifically happened to them yet. I think that their time is almost up. But when you were putting this book together, what was your the strategy that you took? I mean, because there's a lot of illegal activities that you could put together that are at the feet of the Clintons.
Well, the plot opens up early in the book that there is this conflict that's going on between America and this force that wants to return the world back to its original ownership, which is this global syndicate. And so that's the main theme that I wanted to stick with. And what I found was that the power of this global syndicate was so incredible, so unstoppable. We don't really feel it because we just see it as propaganda. But there are people who are willing to sell their souls for individual wealth and power to become aligned with this global syndicate. and princes and nobles. I'm Scottish, and I have my genealogy done back to the year 695. And I'm amazed when I read the story of some of my ancestors, the deals that they made with England for more lands or more, freedom from having to fight in wars or whatever, and sold out their brothers and sisters for that kind of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I was seeing. So when I went back to 1992, or actually a little bit before that, when Clinton was governor of Arkansas, you saw the drug operation that was operating out of Mena, Arkansas. Well, it was happening on his turf, but it was actually a CIA operation. Daddy Bush was actually trading guns and money and drugs to wage private wars around the world that Congress wouldn't approve. Clinton got a piece of it, and that piece was huge, and it was in cash. Now, there's not much you can do with cash. You can't just go deposit cash in the bank because they can trace it. So they did what was called the Manila envelope campaign. This was a campaign where they stuffed Manila envelopes with cash, and they mailed the cash to the superdelegates. The Democrat Party has a system. It's a private company, but they have a system of superdelegates. These are people who will always make the right decision for the party. They're former senators, former congressmen, former governors, former committee chairs, people that they know will make a decision that will benefit the Democrat Party. Screw the people. It's the party that counts. We have another country we're dealing with right now that thinks that way. But let me get back to the story. Once they received this money, they knew what it was for. In 1992, Bill Clinton was going to run against Daddy Bush. Daddy Bush had like a 91% approval rating at one point because of the Gulf War. It was war TV. CNN was born on Daddy Bush. It was amazing. We watched it. We couldn't wait to get done with work so we could run home and get to the TV and watch some more war. That was what he was running against, and we thought, he doesn't have a chance. But what happened? What happened is Bill Clinton walked out on that debate stage, and George Bush folded his arms and leaned back and didn't put up a fight at all. Why? Because Bill Clinton knew his whole operation. He'd already sent all the money to the superdelegates. We knew so much about Bill Clinton by the time the election happened in November of 1992 that we thought there's no way in hell this guy's going to win. And he won with 43% of the vote because his opponent was two people, Ross Perot and George Bush. And the rest is history. The first 2 years of the Clinton presidency were so bad. It was like a cocaine party gone wild. Congress saw what happened. The people saw what happened. We didn't elect the guy. Nobody I know or knew then voted for him. So in 1994, the contract with America stripped his Congress and Senate away from him. And he knew, right then, he was going to be a one-term president if he didn't play ball. And Newt Gingrich made him play ball. And how did they stop Newt Gingrich? They spied on him. They trailed him. They listened to all his phone conversations and recorded them. This was unheard of in those days. And then they turned the tape over to the Senate, Tom Daschle, and they ended up pushing Newt Gingrich out of the speakership and out of Congress. So this is the level of espionage that existed inside our government. Most people didn't see that. So I said, I'm going to write a book that plays this story of the rise of the Clinton crime syndicate all the way to where we are right now, including, I'll call it an insurance policy, a plot to do something terrible inside our country, because they know eventually we're going to wake up. Eventually, they're going to have to face us, and we're not going to be happy about it once we learn the truth. And that's what's happening right now. What we're seeing now, all these pedophilia arrests, which, by the way, pedophilia is the gateway into that syndicate. In order to be loyal in that syndicate, you have to turn your soul over to them, and that's the way you do it. And the more you do, the higher up in the ranks you go. These are not people that you want to trifle with at all.
No, it's built on blackmail, murder, just the most horrific things you can possibly imagine. Now, with regard to that specific Manila envelope operation, I've never heard that before. Was that something that you were able to discover in the course of your research into the Clintons?
I had it before that. This happened back in 1990, 1991. I ran across an article called the Manila Envelope Operation. And it was cash that was showing up in Washington. It was 10,000 here, 100,000 there, a couple 100,000 there. There was so much money in Mena, Arkansas. It was crazy. It was insane. Barry Seals buried it in his backyard. He buried it in the woods. He put it in all over his house, everywhere. There was so much money, you couldn't get rid of it. Every bank in town was bloated with cash. And this is a small town. There was a ton of money being siphoned off this operation, and there were a ton of bodies piling up. Mm-hmm. So this is a long game for them, and they thought they would take advantage of it and make themselves rich and powerful. What they were actually serving as are soldiers or generals for the global syndicate. When Bill Clinton sold our Loran missile technology to China, it wasn't to open up trade with China. It was to trade it for money and power so he could run for president and win. Mm-hmm. That's what they were doing. They were selling our country so that they personally could benefit.
You know, we're kind of seeing all of the blowback from that right now. I mean, many people in our movement anyways, are very aware of the threat that China faces against the United States. Meanwhile, the people on the left are, completely open-armed. They don't seem to have any care in the world about China. But I would say we're on the verge of another global war, a Cold War that we're already in with China. China is moving in places like Hong Kong. They're 10 years ahead of schedule there. And we just got done with CV-19, COVID. What else are they going to have in store for us? Thank God for President Trump having brought back businesses and working to pull American companies back out of there. But what else do you think they could have in store?
Well, you bring up a very interesting point, because they were perfectly willing to let this 50-year plan play out, where China was going to become Hong Kong was going to become a part of China again. Mm-hmm. But as you know, even well before the first election, President Trump was talking about this trade deficit with China and how stupid our people were in making these bad deals with China, and how he was going to do something about it. Well, in spite of all of the attacks that he was under from all these fronts, he did open up trade negotiations with China. It kind of turned into a trade war, but it really didn't, because there was absolutely no way China could win this. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, and I've been to China many times, I've seen the ghost cities, I've been to Wuhan and Chengdu and Shenzhen, and I've dealt with China almost my whole career. We're dealing with them now. The issue is that we buy tons of stuff from China, metal and plastics and all kinds of nanotechnology and electronics, but they buy nothing from us. Mm-hmm. So when the trade negotiations started to try to balance this, there was no way China could win, because there's really China, which is the Chinese people, mm-hmm. and there's the Chinese party, the CCP. They're mm-hmm. two completely separate things. Mm-hmm. The CCP has this idea, and there's a speech that was by a person named General Chi. General Chi in 2005 made a speech translated into English. It is very chilling. It says that we're perfectly willing to lose 300 million Chinese if that's what it takes to kill 300 million Americans. Mm-hmm. And we'll simply just take their land. We can make more Chinese, but we can't make more party. Mm-hmm. So the party will survive. When we see that the Chinese CCP was willing to sacrifice the Hubei province, specifically Wuhan, which was a city in the Hubei province, we're willing to sacrifice them as virus carriers and send them all over the world to kill enough people so that we can take back over the world. We're perfectly willing to do that. Mm-hmm. That's what people need to come to terms with. who and what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, there's certainly a cold, calculating amorality with regard to their decision making and the things that they're okay with. I think that we've talked about that as a possibility. Obviously, if this is a manufactured, sort of event. Clearly, the situation that happened in Wuhan was a large part of that. It had to start somewhere, and if they're going to use that as an excuse to spread it to the rest of the world. But I think that a lot of people here in America looked at that, and they said, how could they possibly do that? Why would the Chinese government be willing to sacrifice all of those people? They wouldn't. It's their people. But you're right. It's the party that matters to them. It's not the citizens. They can always have more kids.
Right. And the interesting thing about humans is we have this fantastic immune system. Mm-hmm. We walk through an ocean of viruses and microbes every day, mm-hmm. and yet we survive almost pretty much symptom free. We have a cold now and then or an allergy now and then, but that's it. So when you take a virus that's not built for humans and you re-engineer it to infect humans have a hard time building an immunity to it. They can, but it's the reaction that some bodies have to that can be quite violent. Mm-hmm. Our histamine reaction or the way our lungs react to it can be enough to really put us in a hurt. If you don't have a good immune system or a good healthy body, you can really be taken down by this stuff. However, the virus isn't being manufactured in a factory. The virus was released, and then it was put into humans. Mm-hmm. Humans become the factory.
Exactly.
What happens is the little macrophage, and I'll just use my little R2-D2 here. The little macrophage looks like this little robot. It drops into your body, and it's loaded with DNA, loaded with genetic material. It finds a suitable cell enzymatically, attaches itself to the cell, and injects the genetic material into the cell. The cell then becomes the factory. Mm-hmm. The cell then divides, and the chromosomes divide, and we make more viruses, and out they go. Each time a body does that, there's a slight alteration. It's a probability factor. Mm-hmm. Normally what happens is over time, this virus becomes less and less virulent, because if you don't have a host, you can't spread. Mm-hmm. And we think that's what happened, that the Asian genetics in China reacted very badly to this stuff. Mm-hmm. They sent out millions of Chinese to Seattle and California and Italy and everywhere that we could get. They could send them until Trump discovered it. And he shut off any people traveling to us from those countries and bought us a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Caucasians, however, have a little bit different genetic makeup. When that virus went into us, for some of us, we saw no symptoms at all, and yet we built antibodies to it. For others, it jumped right into the lungs. Within a matter of hours, it jumped in the lungs. I had it in January. It took me like 4 days to fight it off. I just wolfed down vitamin C, and I've done that before. It's had no effect whatsoever, but it did this time.
Wow.
It was amazing. Like, my girlfriend said, here, take these, 1 gram vitamin C's. And I was like, all right. So I took one, and like 2 hours later, I felt better. I took another one. I felt better. 3 days later, I was done. No cough, no nothing. And
That's
my
great.
body's loaded with antibodies right now. So I'm immune. And the rest of the story is the mask. What happened was this campaign to put Americans into what I call solitary confinement. Mm-hmm. You see, I'm a little hard of hearing, so I read lips. When I'm talking with somebody, it's really important for me to be able to see the muscles around your mouth and your face, because I get what you're saying by how you're saying it. Mm-hmm. Once you cover everything but your eyes, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they were trying to do, is stop us from talking with one another, make us afraid of each other. And that's what this whole game is about. The masks do nothing to prevent a virus from spreading. No. They're just there to keep you in solitary confinement.
And there's a certain psychological effect, too, when you see people in public and all you see is the eyes. You miss those social cues. Are they smiling? Are they frowning? Are they angry with me? Are they happy to see me? And because you miss out on that, there's a lot that can go wrong. And obviously, many people decide to just continue to stay home because they don't want to have to deal with going out and seeing all of this stuff. They think that they are in mortal danger because of the second wave is coming. Coincidentally, that has all but completely disappeared from all major news broadcasts. I haven't seen a ticker on the bottom of the screen giving me a death count in quite some time, and. Now it's all about, the coming race war, essentially. And I think President Trump is doing a great job with that. Did you happen to see his speech earlier today?
Yes, I did. I saw it. It was very good. I like the way, and I know who his speech writers are. Mm-hmm. They're good writers. But President Trump ad-libs a lot. He reads some of it, and then he'll throw a few of his own words in there, and he'll go back to it. That's why the speeches, even though they're 45 minutes, will go an hour and a half. Because he has this eidetic memory. He has the ability to link unrelated things together into a coherent thought. And he could speak that way without notes at all. He's a tremendous power when he's behind the microphone.
What did you think about his statement regarding the Gulf War? He said said something about the Gulf War and said many of you had something to do with that. And then he repeated it in a way, kind of accusing. I couldn't tell if he was speaking to the press or if he was speaking to people in government who kind of perpetuated that lie.
Well, I think it was a little both, because there were officers that were in that audience. There was a lot of brass in that audience. So yes, he was speaking to the press, but he was also speaking to those officers. Now, in the military, as you go up the ranks, you get to a certain level, it's colonel, full bird colonel in the Air Force. This is what separates the person who enlisted as a second lieutenant and worked their way up from the people who went to the academy. The people who went to the academy are almost exclusively reserved for full bird, 1-star, 2-star, and on up in the generals. That is a very political position. Very few colonels and generals are apolitical. The business of politics is very deep in that level of rank. It wasn't always that way, but after World War II, 1933, this began to get formed. But after World War II, we entered a phase in this country which we called the permanent war culture. In other words, we're either at war or we're ready for war all the time. After we fought wars in the old days, we would convert our warships into shipping ships. Everyone would go home. They'd go back to plowing or whatever. And if there was another war, then we'd all come back together again. There was an industrial military complex that was built around making weapons, maintaining weapons, and using weapons as diplomatic instruments. And this is what President Trump was talking about. The Gulf War, the original Gulf War, where we went into free Kuwait from Saddam Hussein invading. Everybody was behind that. Everybody thought, gee, that's a really good idea. Let's go kick Saddam Hussein's butt all the way back to Baghdad. Congress stopped them outside of Baghdad. It said, that's it. We've accomplished the war. We're not going to go any further. The highway of death was what it was. But it was Bush Jr. that decided we're going to go back in. Trump was against all of that. And he was very public with that, going all the way back to the 1990s. This is wrong. We shouldn't be doing it. That's not what we're there for. And he's been against it the entire time. And now, unlike any other politician we've ever had, which I don't really think Trump is a politician, but he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do for the last 25 years. He's not putting troops in countries. He's not using the military to nation build and to force, people to do what we want them to do. He's had plenty of opportunities to do it, but he's backed off from it. Now, I don't think is anybody in the world that thinks that he's weak or that he's spineless or that he won't do what he said he's going to do. I mean, he'll send some cruise missiles right down your chimney. He said that's what he's going to do. And he'll take out Soleimani and Baghdadi, and that's another story. If you want to hear it, I'll tell you what happened there.
Okay.
I think we're entering a new age, and I seriously think if America keeps its stuff together, the Democrats may lose as many as 50 congressmen in November, and there are 12 senators up for election. I expect half of those will lose their jobs. America is very frustrated with what's going on right now. They see what's going on in the streets, and they see the tactics that are being used by I call them the global media empire. You talked about the lower third in the news broadcasts.
Mm-hmm.
How many people missed the fact that it said global pandemic in the lower third for the last 5 months?
Yeah.
Now it doesn't say that anymore. Now it says BLM protesters, peaceful protesters, over and over and over again. We're hit with that.
Yeah. And people are very frustrated.
The BLM doesn't even exist. The BLM isn't even real. They don't even have a business license.
Oh, they don't?
I thought a marketing plan.
I figured they must have had some type of organizational structure just because they keep talking about it. We've recently talked on the program that if you go to the BLM website and you try to donate, then it goes through Act Blue, which is, of course, the fundraising arm of the Democratic Party, and all of that money is essentially going to Joe Biden right now. And, of course, strange enough, he's had record fundraising out of nowhere because everybody's been donating money to the BLM movement, and then they don't realize it's going to go to Joe Biden. Now, when we were talking earlier about this global criminal structure, I think that all of us have our own unique conception of what that is. I mean, where do you see the Clintons in relation to this global criminal structure, and how do you see it as being set up?
It was actually set up as fireworks going off outside.
Me too, yeah.
It was originally set up back in the 19th century. If you go back a long, long time ago, there was a thing called the Opium Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Britain would refine opium, and they would put it on ships, and they would sail it back to the Chinese and sell it to the Chinese, and, of course, just dopified their country. And these ships could sail up rivers, so they went way into China selling this opium, and people were just hammered. Well, the emperor could see what was happening to his gross national product, and he couldn't get anybody excited about anything because everybody was stoned. So he passed a rule. No more opium. We're quitting cold turkey. That's it. Our troops are going to go in and take care of all this. So they did. And the British took their ships and went in and they shelled civilians and forced them to back into their drug cartel. It's been used for a long, long time, and it's been used in the Middle East. It's been used in South America. When the CIA was formed after World War II, it needed money, lots of money, to do what it needed to do. It needed like trillions of dollars, which was unheard of in the 40s, just unheard of, that amount of money. And so what they did is they began transporting, selling, and moving illegal contraband around the world. And they've been doing it a long time, through Vietnam, all through World War II, all through Korean War, and it got larger and larger and larger. Now, in the Middle East, there's a network that operates out of Syria. It's kind of the epicenter of this movement of a special drug. We would call it speed here, but it's more than that in the Middle East. It actually makes you superhuman while you're high on it. You just almost don't even feel a bullet wound. It's that kind of drug. And it's being marketed and sold out of Syria, and a lot of people in the Middle East are hooked on it. And the money was collected there in Syria. So in I think it's chapter 3 or chapter 4 of the book, I talk about the Benghazi event that happened in September of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Once Hillary Clinton participated in the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, and basically they chased him into the streets and shot him in the face like a dog.
Yeah.
She immediately put forces in place to scoop up all the missiles, rockets, and grenades, put them on ships, and move them to Syria. because she had another plan, and that was to take out Bashar al-Assad. And she needed to arm an army, which they called ISIS, that developed into ISIS. Dinesh D'Souza hit the nail on the head with his first film. So this level of criminality took control of that drug cartel in Syria in doing all of this. And they ran it like a sledgehammer. That's where the trucks came from, and the weapons and the intel and everything was like, wait a minute, these people don't have tanks, they don't have aircraft carriers, they don't have satellites, and yet we can't beat them? It's because they were being fed intel by the Clinton State Department. She was operating a business out of the State Department. Mm-hmm. How do I know this? Because when Trump became president, he decided he was going to start withdrawing troops from the Middle East. Well, when the Syrian conflict got stable, I won't say it was over, but it was stable, there were tons of refugees stuck in Turkey that wanted to go home. Erdogan wanted them to go home. He didn't want them in his country anymore, but there was something in the way. There was a Syrian contingent there that was ISIS, and there were American troops. Nobody wanted to put American troops in harm's way. Mm-hmm. So President Trump moved, and there was about 27 of them, moved them from where they were on the border with Turkey down to the other side of the Taco Bell, not quite out of country, but out of harm's way. And when they did, it opened up the corridor for Turkey to move in against that ISIS contingent. Mm-hmm. Well, that presented a big problem because they're running this drug operation. They're collecting big amounts of money in this region, and it was all going to be taken apart. So Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff push and push and push and push and finally get approval to fly to Jordan to speak to King Hussein. And what they fly there, and immediately they go to King Hussein and they say, look, you have to condemn this withdrawal of American troops from the Syrian border. You've got to attack President Trump on this. Then King Hussein said, no, actually, I think it's a good idea. They panicked. So they called a courier. In the Middle East, you don't use radio, you don't use email, because it can all be traced. You use couriers, real people. They give a message to the courier, and they send him off. And the courier is very good at not being trailed, but not that good. He went on trains and buses and three-wheelers and horseback and donkey, and he finally made it to Baghdadi. And when he did, as soon as he made contact, our special forces say, we got him. Of course, the message went straight to the White House. The White House said, get whatever clearances you have to, go in and get that guy. And that was on Friday. Saturday, they went in. They went in, and they went in so fast, they didn't have time to get their vests on to blow themselves up. There was a woman there with 14 kids. She put her vest on, but they popped her right in the forehead before she could pull the ripcord. They saved all the kids. They chased Baghdadi down a tunnel, and he ended up blowing himself up or dying in that tunnel like a dog, according to President Trump. That was Saturday, and he made the announcement Saturday night, we killed him, we got him. But then Sunday morning, there was another announcement. The next day, President Trump comes out and talks more calmly about it. And he says, oh, by the way, we got a ton of intel out of that compound. That was Sunday. Wednesday of that week, the impeachment proceedings began.
Yeah.
This was the war that was going on. And this is, American people don't know this. They don't see this happening. All this is stitched together in the book.
It's beautiful. I love the way you just tie everything together, because these are all things that, maybe we're a unique audience. I mean, these are things that we've definitely been following and, wondering out loud, why was it that Schiff and Pelosi flew to the Middle East together? I mean, that makes so much sense.
They were trying to protect their cash flow.
Yeah.
And President Trump has been very strategic about this. He knows it takes a ton of money to operate that system. They have to pay for ads. They have to pay Facebook. They have to pay Twitter. I mean, you know what it costs to advertise on Facebook. It's insane. Mm-hmm. A small campaign on Facebook's $10,000 a week.
Yeah.
And these people are spending $1 million a week, $1 million a week on Facebook to influence the 1.2 billion people that are on Facebook. They do a pretty good job at it. They have a new Twitter called TikTok. A lot of people don't even know that's owned by the CCP. Everything you see on there is as slick and tailor-made to you as it could possibly be. That's why it pulls you in. It's all CCP owned.
They also have the ability to gather all of the data from your phone, from every single app, all of your messages, all of your passwords, absolutely everything. I already recommended to the audience that everybody delete TikTok if they've got it on there. So clearly, drug cartels, human trafficking,
That's the other big one.
Exactly.
Drugs used to be the big form of money. Now it's human flesh. Now, I mean, think for a moment. Who has the power to force migrate millions of people from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and the Yucatan area, force them to walk with nothing but their cell phone and the clothes on their back for 2,000 miles to throw themselves against Trump's southern border to create a humanitarian crisis? Who has the power to make people walk away from their families and their homes and their traditions and their language and try to force their way into the United States? You have no idea how powerful this global syndicate is. It's immense.
Who do you see sitting at the top of this syndicate? Obviously, George Soros is a very powerful, very wealthy individual, but I've always wondered if it's actually him sitting at the top or if he is simply just the public face of some other very private people.
He's an easy target, but you're right. It is a very small group. In the book, I allude to a supernatural component to this, that it isn't just some, like Prince Charles or somebody that you think is a dodo who's actually a brilliant super criminal. I don't think it's somebody like that. I think it's an intelligence that's very old and very powerful, and I mean on a supernatural level. Because when you get to this point where you're able to pull in all of the rich and famous and all the people that want to stay beautiful and famous all of their lives, and you're giving them magic almost to keep them young, keep them wealthy. I mean, if you looked at pictures of Hillary Clinton after she got done with her Secretary of State stint, she left in roughly 2013. You looked at her then, you would say, oh, there's no way this woman's ever running for president. She was wrinkled. She was farsighted. She was out of shape. Her hair looked terrible. She was worn out. And I said, don't count her out. These people have magical powers. I'm telling you, in 4 years, you're going to see her again, and she's not going to look anything like this. And I was right. And you look at her today, she looks better now than when she ran in 2016. And I'm not saying it's any magical drug. I know there's things called adrenochrome that have been talked about out there. I don't know if that's real or not. But I do know that when these people are betrayed by the syndicate, by this power, they decay really fast. When they're sustained by it, you almost cannot touch them.
There was a time after Hillary lost the election that it seemed to me that she did kind of fall apart, kind of start to, regress very rapidly. I saw a picture of her. She looked like she had, like a raccoon eyes, just completely black, hollowed out, very pale. She looked like she was, not going to make it too long. But now, I mean, I think she's had basically the last 3 or 4 years to just kind of sit around the house and tweet nasty things about the president or do an interview or two every now and then. So she's had some time to relax. And we've definitely talked about adrenochrome on the show here before. And the first time that I ever heard about it was in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And at that time, the internet was not necessarily widely available. So I didn't know if it was real either, but it actually is a true substance. I mean, it is real, and there's only a certain way that it can be harvested. And there have been eyewitness accounts of people coming out of Hollywood and these places and saying that it truly does exist. But that it makes you think, go back in time in history. And there have been historical accounts of royals, of wealthy landowners taking the blood of young children, drinking them. We can go back to certain biblical stories. Simon of Trent, that was a story that had to do with that. So, yeah, I mean, and then it also kind of informs the idea of vampires and other types of ghouls. And so, I mean, I tend to think that it probably really is a real thing. I mean, these people would stop at nothing to remain young, to remain healthy, to maintain their power. I can see it. I can see it happening.
Well, I can see it happening too, because the movie Jupiter Ascending seemed to hit on it pretty well. I was so amazed by things that Hollywood does that reveal things that normally should be secret. It's almost as though they have rules that say you got to put it out in front of the people or you can't do it. It's not allowed. So Jupiter Ascending talks about this compound that's synthesized from harvesting humans. Mm-hmm. And that compound, when you bathe in it, it rejuvenates you. And the one woman who is the house of Abraxas there in space that's dealing with Jupiter, she says, she's 5,000 years old and her mother was 14,000 years old. She had a peculiar line in the movie. She said, when you own everything, when you own star systems, the most valuable thing in the universe is time. And that's what these people do. They buy time. They become immortals.
It's the only logical thing you can think. I mean, they've already conquered an entire planet. They already have subjugated many, many different cultures and different races. I mean, that's the only thing they can do. Was there anything in your research to write this book that you came across that was surprising for you? Any crimes of the Clintons that you had not been aware of?
Yeah, the one that really surprised me. I changed the name of one of the real world characters by request because he was really afraid. And when I was working as a technical writer, I had a team and we were preparing bank processes for a bank that was going to be purchased by another bank. They had written down all their procedures and these things needed to be captured. So that's what we were doing. The bank that I was doing the procedures for was busted for laundering drug cartel cash, $329 billion worth of it. Mm-hmm. So the bank paid some fines and a couple of people got put in jail, and that was the end of that. And so the acquisition went through. And the new bank, which was Wells Fargo, bought this bank that was being acquired, as they had done to several regional banks. And we kind of thought, because we've written all the procedures down, everything is good, that all that activity was going to go away. Well, as it turns out, it didn't. This auditor, banks have to go through audits every now and then. And one of the things, if I go in as an auditor, I'm looking for certain things. I look at corrective action procedures. I look at calibration records. I look at software records and make sure that they're using all licensed software. That's when I do my audit. This guy was a forensic auditor, and he was specifically looking for the number of new bank accounts that had been opened, because bank officers are incentivized to open new accounts. And when they open a certain amount, they get a big bonus. So that is a weak spot for banks. And so he goes in and makes sure that all the bank accounts are legit. Well, he goes in and normally he finds a few hundred here and there because bankers are working late night or they're getting their bonuses, and he finds them and he ends up turning the bank in and they fix it. He didn't find a few hundred. He found tens of thousands of them. Wow. And normally these accounts sit there and don't do anything. They just sit there. They get the bonus for opening the account. Not these accounts. These accounts, money was going into them and money was going out of them, but they didn't have names. They didn't have addresses. They didn't have birth certificates, no social security numbers associated with them. They were bogus accounts, but there was money, lots of money going in and out of these accounts. So he decided to make a dossier, which he did 1,000 pages of it. And he very quietly went to the district attorney in New York and turned it in. He said, this is what I found in my audit. This is the proof. This is the evidence. These are the people that are doing it. This is where the money's coming from. This is where the money's going to. And I'm out of here. He dropped his cell phone in the Hudson, and that's the end of that for him. He just didn't go public after that. What was interesting, though, is that the district attorney decided to file a notice of deferred prosecution. Mm-hmm. And that's where I picked up his story. So after our interview, and this was off the air, this was just research for the book, he said he was scared for his life because he put all that evidence in the hand of the district attorney, plenty of evidence to take not the bank down, but individuals in the bank and fine them billions of dollars to make them stop taking this drug cartel cash in. And they were doing it through phony accounts. So it was really off the books. But she didn't. She filed a notice of deferred prosecution. So I said, gosh, I got to find out why she did that. Well, it turns out Wells Fargo had taken on a new member of the board. Very smooth talking individual, very well connected individual. And he made a public statement once this was brought to his attention by the district attorney. You know, we're now aware that this has happened. We're going to turn over a new leaf. This is never going to happen again. Well, they reassigned a few people and they lowered the bonus of a couple people, but nobody went to jail. And they still didn't stop doing it. That's when he knew his life was in danger. Well, a few weeks after this occurred and all this dust settled, that woman was picked out of the district attorney's position in New York, and she was made the attorney general. Her name was Loretta Lynch.
That was for the Southern District of New York, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Suffolk County. A couple months later, that board member was plucked out of Wells Fargo and placed as head of the FBI, Mr. James Comey. And he came directly from the Clinton State Department. Mm-hmm. So now you see how all this fits together.
Fascinating. Yes, that is incredible. I think that every one of us, every single person here in the audience has known that at some level there were incredible crimes being committed. But when I read that particular chapter, my jaw dropped to the floor. I had absolutely no idea how brazen it could possibly be. You know, we talk about emails being left open for the Chinese. You know, I mean, obviously, agents have lost their lives because of intelligence. Illegal transfer of technology to China. But money laundering for drug cartels and having the future attorney general and the future director of the FBI being directly involved. It's no wonder that nothing was done in our country for 8 years plus. And the only people who paid any prices were just very low-level people.
Well, I asked a couple of accountant friends of mine, if this happened, what's the take? In other words, if you look the other way when crimes are being done like this, what's the percentage that you get? Mm-hmm. And he said, typically what we see when we prosecute is 20%, about 20% off the top. So if you think for a moment, $400 billion worth of drugs, they were, by the way, fined $1.2 billion for doing this, which is lunch money for them. Mm-hmm. $400 billion, 20% of that is roughly $80 billion. $80 billion of totally off the books dark money. Nobody knows it exists. After Obama left office, well, actually, no, that was before then. It was in 2013. He started an organization called Organizing for Action, the OFA. Mm-hmm. He was interviewed about it. And they said, so, I mean, you're president of the United States. Where are you doing your fundraising? How are you putting the money together to do this great thing that you... He said, it's already fully funded. We have 30,000 paid activists nationwide. That was in 2013. We now know there are 52,500 employees of the OFA. And their job is to do exactly what Antifa and BLM has been doing. That's who's running it, is the OFA.
So you think that this laundered drug cartel money was used to set up OFA?
I'm not a forensic accountant, but I would say if you could make the public statement that you're fully funded and you're a 501c4, which means you do not have to disclose who your donors are, that's where the money came from.
Oh, yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense to me. All right, you guys, I have opened up the phones. So if you have questions for Brooks, you want to just talk about the crimes of the Clintons, you want to talk about things that are happening in the world, we're going to have another 50 minutes to go ahead and get into it. I'm looking forward to this. We do have Nunyo Venus. Nunyo is supposed to be on the line, but it looks like the microphone is not working. So we're going to give him a little bit of time there. But you guys, I have dropped the meeting ID and the password into the chat. I've dropped the Zoom link a couple of times. If you are on a phone or your computer and you've got the Zoom app, you can go ahead and click that link and it should open up directly in that. If you want to call in from your cell phone or your home telephone, you'll just need to call the number that you see up there on the screen and use those credentials right there, and we can go ahead and get you on here. What do you think is next for the Clintons? I mean, where do they go from here? I mean, clearly, I think she wants to be president still. I don't think she's ever going to let that go. But, I mean, what else can she do? I mean, she's clearly under an incredible amount of scrutiny. I mean, I'm hoping, and I believe the entire audience is hoping, that President Trump is going to take some action. But we just got to get a little bit closer to the election, I think, so that it has a full impact.
This is a big piece of pie. Let me take a couple bites out of it here.
Please.
First of all, the Democratic National Committee is, in effect, they don't have a candidate. They've painted themselves into a corner with Joe Biden. They're trying to keep him in the basement. Everybody knows that as soon as the debate happens, the first question is going to come out, and Joe Biden's going to say something like, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and you know the thing. And what was the question again? And that's going to be it. That debate's going to be over. I don't think there even will be debates for that reason. Yeah. I predicted early last year that the convention in Milwaukee would be a brokered convention. What does that mean? Well, for the Democrat Party, when it goes to a brokered convention, it means that no nominee has more than 50% of the vote. Now, as I said, the Democrat National Committee uses superdelegates. That makes up a certain portion of it, but you can't just run on that. You also have to have some votes. The issue is there have not been any primaries. So the votes have not accumulated. New York has postponed theirs. Bernie is holding on to his 329 delegates. He's not giving them up, even though he's postponed his race. So that means that when it goes to the convention, they're going to have a vote. And when the delegates stand up to speak, nobody's going to have 50%. Now, this occurred in 1940 as well. This was after Roosevelt had already served 2 terms. And his vice president, then John Nance Garner, was running. But he couldn't get 50%. He had about 46%. He just couldn't get over the line. So it went to a brokered convention. And Harry Hopkins, who was an agent that was working for the Soviets at the time in the Roosevelt White House, pulled a trick. He had the superintendent of the building in which the convention was being held in the basement with a microphone like this one. And when the first vote happened and John Nance Garner could not get 50% of the vote, they didn't know what to do. So the senator stood up and read a letter that Roosevelt had ostensibly written, which basically said something like, I am not interested in running for president. I think that the people should vote for whoever they want to. And everybody looked around like, what do you mean, whoever we want to? What does that mean? That's not an endorsement. And over the loudspeaker came, we want Roosevelt. We want Roosevelt. So the whole place started chanting, we want Roosevelt. And when the din died down a little bit, the party bosses would step forward and say, we nominate President Roosevelt for President of the United States. And he won 86% of the vote, and he wasn't even on the ballot.
Wow.
That's what happens in a brokered convention. So that could happen. Hillary Clinton is not even on the ballot. And the party has been pushed so far left with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Hillary Clinton could step in, sweep the stripper glitter out of the way, walk to the stage and say, what the hell do you people think you're doing? You need a centrist like me. I beat President Trump once and I can beat him again. And she is going to be the nominee. That's what's going to happen. That's my prediction.
I think that's a likely scenario. All right. Looks like Nunyo, your audio is not working. I'm just going to go ahead and pull in the next caller, and hopefully your audio will work. Now, Sveta is up next. Sveta Umant, listener from India, and often calls into the program. Long-time listener, long-time caller. Sveta, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Redman.
Hey, how's it going? Now, just so you know, my guest, Brooks, he said he's a little hard of hearing, so just, I'm going to have to repeat your question back there, because I don't know how good the audio is going to be.
All right. Actually, I don't really have a question for regarding the Clintons, but I was just thinking, how Ghislaine Maxwell, how she was caught, and she was I just saw a video wherein someone went and went around the property where she was living in, and the neighbors had no clue. And I wonder how long she was in New Hampshire, and how did she manage to get her vegetables, her her meat and her grocery without the neighbors noticing? And it was pretty isolated, the area.
Yeah.
There must have been someone in the property who was helping her, with all that. And targeted individuals, we have no privacy at all. And to imagine that woman has so much privacy, and one of her accusers, she managed to get some evidence, and the judge actually had the audacity to ask her to destroy the evidence and even provide proof that she's destroyed the evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sweta, this is perfect because Brooks, I had a question at the end of the program last night. I forgot to answer on the air. And I wanted to ask you next about Ghislaine Maxwell. Very strange situation. She purchased her home in Bedford, New Hampshire, I believe, for cash in late December of 2019. And she was listed on the Wikipedia site for that town as a notable resident of the town. So clearly some people knew that she was living there. What do you think is going on with Ghislaine? I mean, why would she be stupid enough to buy a home in New Hampshire and hang out there? I think perhaps she either wanted to be caught, or she had so much hubris, she thought she was never going to be caught and it was going to be slam dunk, no problem. What do you think?
Well, that's the way it is with the global syndicate. They're protected up and down the level. So when Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, there were a lot of people sweating spinal fluid around the world. And he was summarily dispatched. So he was a loose end. Mm-hmm. Ghislaine was another story because she participated in all of this, and she doesn't really know where all the bodies are buried, but she knows where all the bodies came from because she was a recruiter. She was a groomer. Mm-hmm. And she actually thought that she would be protected. She didn't think she would be arrested. And I think that what happened is President Trump called the leaders of the FBI in and said, if you don't do this, I'm going to bring in Elliot Ness. If you don't do this, I'm going to make General Michael Flynn head of the FBI. I'm going to give you a chance to get your reputation back. And we're going to start taking these people out. And it was funny because the day before I said, there's going to be a full moon on July 4th at midnight. I think the arrests are about to begin. Mm-hmm. And the next day, Maxwell was arrested. If she stays alive and she discloses what I think she's going to disclose, that's why I said be brave, patriots, because there are people that are going to be implicated in this. I don't think people are ready for this. Yeah. It could be Chief Justice John Roberts. It could be lawyers. It could be senators, congressmen, even governors that we think a lot of. Mm-hmm. But they were at Epstein's Island, and she's going to implicate them. This could be the crack that causes the cartel, or the cabal, as everyone calls them, to finally break apart. You're going to see people scattering for the docks pretty soon.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And when Ghislaine was arrested the other day, we have a daily show that we do on Tuesdays and Thursdays during the day, Occam's Razor. And at that time, I was speaking with my co-host Methods, and I said, what do you think the chances are that Ghislaine is actually the first arrest? Because in the post, it said the first arrest was going to shock the world, it's going to wake everybody up. Clearly, she has just as many ties as Jeffrey Epstein, maybe even additional ties going back further with regard to her relationship with her father, Robert Maxwell. A lot of controversy around him and his manner of death. This could crack it wide open. I think that it will, clearly it's going to go directly to the British royals. It is connected to many people in business and industry and Hollywood. And I was actually told, did you do any research on the death of Steve Bing, Hollywood producer, about a week and a half ago? I think that his death may be related to the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Also a big Clinton fundraiser.
That's exactly it, yeah.
I have a chapter in the book. I don't know if you've gotten to it or not, but Michael Rousseau is the talented one in the family.
Mm-hmm.
They, after the Seth Rich murder... Yes, go ahead, Sveta.
Go ahead, Sveta.
No, please go on.
Okay, go ahead. She said, go ahead.
Oh, okay. After the Seth Rich murder, they became disheartened with DC, and they said, let's go to Hollywood. Let's just get out of town. We'll go to Hollywood. We're talented musicians. We'll get a start. They end up making their way to Harvey Weinstein's house. Of course, I changed his name in the book because at the time the investigation was actually going on.
Sure.
And in that encounter, what I reveal is the way that films are financed. I wrote a screenplay, and I grew up in a Hollywood area, so I understand these things a little bit. The hardest thing to do when you write a screenplay or write a movie or write a TV series is to get the funding to shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, two of the biggest sources for making movies in Hollywood are the CIA and DARPA.
Really?
A lot of people don't know that. They think it comes from private investors. Most of the money comes from the CIA and DARPA. A lot of it, millions and millions of dollars. The way that it's done is DARPA will send a grant to Hollywood to make a movie, like let's say Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of military, it has a lot of General Motors, and a lot of Dodge in it. It's a big promotional movie. So DARPA and the CIA, they put up money. General Motors put up money to make this movie. Then what happens is Hillary Clinton will go to Hollywood to do a fundraiser, and they'll take some of that money and write it back to the DNC or write it back to the campaign. This is how taxpayer funds are laundered through organizations like Hollywood, organizations like Planned Parenthood, back to the DNC and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And this is why they could go to Hollywood and walk out with $500 million. It's taxpayer money. It's not actually Hollywood money. It's our money. But DARPA sends it to Hollywood, and Hollywood writes it back to the DNC. That's how it's done.
Yep, exactly. All right, Sweta, did you have any follow-up for Brooks?
It is a little suspicious as well that, she seems to say that she prefers going back to the New York jail, again, where, Bill de Blasio is there, and, where Epstein himself was,
that's
suicided.
pretty strange.
I thought so, too.
Very suspicious. Probably the same guards, too. I don't know.
Right. Maybe she's hoping that she's going to be dispatched so that she doesn't have to give everyone up. All right, Sweta, thank you so much for your call.
There was this other thing as well.
Okay, go ahead.
The part where the courier got caught, and that's how they got to, Benghazi. That's something that, maybe later on, it would make a very interesting story in some book.
Yeah,
sure would.
There is at least one chapter in relation to Benghazi and Charm of Favor, but I think that to her point, I mean, have you thought about fleshing it out, making a more detailed depiction, maybe perhaps from the point of view of Christopher Stevens?
Well, I have Chris Stevens pretty heavily in the book,
Yeah.
and I took some artistic license with that because I had to add a couple of characters. One of them I already knew, and the other one was the female that was the attaché there in Benghazi that was working with Stephen. I didn't know her name, so I made it up. But the other guy I knew about, and I knew his position and his relation to the guards that were guarding the gates at Benghazi. So I put that in the book. The issue that I have is with the two seals. The two seals that are there, I only use the information that I actually knew, and then I kind of put words in their mouth. Now, I haven't heard any feedback from the families yet because I think I pretty much nailed it. What I tried to flesh out in the book, at least with respect to putting you on the ground before the first shot was fired in Benghazi, were not only the political stress that was going on.
I meant Baghdadi actually.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, I actually meant Baghdadi, the courier and Baghdadi.
Oh, al-Baghdadi.
Al-Baghdadi. Oh, my apologies.
Well, go ahead and finish up on Benghazi, and then we can.
Well, there was political stress at the time because, as you know, Hillary Clinton had assassinated Muammar Gaddafi, which was allowing a lot of the warlords to take over. They were not Libyan. When Gaddafi was president, the country was making so much money that they provided housing supplements, educational supplements, and healthcare supplements to Libyans. And what happened to Libya is the same thing that's happening to us, is immigrants came in and wanted those same benefits. And Muammar said, no, this is only for Libyans. You can't get those benefits if you're basically an illegal alien.
Mauritanian or something.
Yeah, and then the riots started. Well, what happened was they started framing this because Hillary Clinton wanted to take Gaddafi out. They framed it as these people were freedom fighters. And that's what allowed her to go to the UN and get approval to send jets in, and they bombed the crap out of the Libyan army, and they were able to get enough headway to force Muammar Gaddafi out of hiding into the streets, where they shot him in the face like a dog.
Yeah.
So that's how that worked out. That was the political stress that existed in Benghazi at the time. And Chris Stevens was totally not ready for this. He was sent over there. He was in Tripoli, which was very well fortified, very stable area. When he moved to Benghazi, he died the next day. It was very fast. That whole thing decayed very quickly. And he didn't even know that the CIA was there. Didn't even know the CIA was there. Hillary Clinton was running a CIA operation in Benghazi to gather up missiles, rockets, and grenades and ship them to Syria. That's what came out.
Do you and Sweeta, we're gonna move on to the next caller, okay?
Yeah,
Thank you for your
thanks.
call. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Namaste.
All right, now, next caller on the line. We'll get your name in just a moment, but first, Brooks, I want to ask you: do you think that there was any motivation to have Chris Stevens killed as part of what happened at Benghazi? Because there's been some speculation about what he may have witnessed during his time as an ambassador and clearly working with the Clintons and those CIA. But you're saying the CIA operation he did not know about?
Not till he got to Benghazi. Okay. What happened was from Benghazi, they sent 600, this is even before Chris got there, 600 requests for additional security at Benghazi. They were exposed and they knew it. Now, Hillary said, well, I didn't really want a military footing in Benghazi. I didn't want to put that front forward. It was a big exposure. The big question is, why was Chris Stevens sent there? Hillary Clinton and Chris Stevens go back a ways. He had been involved in there, went home, and then came back. And he knew what was going on. He suspected what was going on. But I think what he discovered were the weapons laundering. And that's what he wanted to talk to Hillary about. I didn't know that you were moving the weapons to Syria. And that's what she didn't want to have come out. Okay. So she basically gave them up.
Okay. All right. Caller, can we get your name?
Yeah, Woody, how you doing?
I'm good, Woody. How about yourself?
Okay, very good. I'd like to know, what is the highest level of technology Brooks Agnew might be aware of maybe if he's aware of the work and understanding of physics of Dr. Judy Wood, and how those people with that technology might be involved with or relate to people on the level of the Clintons. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I assume he's talking about the scalar weapons used from space.
Yeah,
to
direct
vaporize.
energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Direct
You know,
energy.
and you know, I mean,
UFOs, anti-gravity.
the idea of advanced technologies is definitely something we've spoken about on the program here many times in the past. You know, I've always considered the fact that whatever we have commercially here as just regular citizens of the United States has probably already been in use by the military, by people in the government for maybe 30 years or more. You know, before they put it out for us, they've already, you know, made a full use of it to whatever advantage they need. And, you know, even the idea of an electric truck, I mean, that seems futuristic simply because we haven't had the opportunity to have those in wide use here in the United States. But clearly the technology has been there for a long time. Think back to Stan Meyer, his water engine. I think that was his name, Stanley Meyer. And many, many different types of technologies that have been suppressed or just perhaps never released to the public. But yeah, do you have any knowledge of any particular technologies that are in existence, maybe being used by the government that we don't know about?
Well, there are sonic technologies. There are wave technologies that are used in the battlefield. Back in 1997, I had published a paper from a ground probing radar system that I had developed in 1983. And I decided enough time had gone by that I was going to go ahead and publish the paper. So I did. It was on ground probing radar using radio waves to search into the ground for oil and gas. Used it quite successfully, but I didn't really care for the industry. I waited my 10 years and then I published. So in 1997, I was contacted by Congressman Gene Manning out of Alaska and a guy named Dr. Nick Begich. And they were putting together a documentary on a weapons system called HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. And I said, well, I'm not familiar with it. Describe to me what it does. And so they did. And I said, wow, that sounds very much like my ground probing radar technology from 10 years ago. And they said, yeah, but they're doing it with 1 billion watts. I went, oh, I see. And what frequencies are they using? And when they told me the frequencies, I said, my first reaction on the phone was, hey, they can't use those frequencies because they'll set up a solar tap. That would be like not extinction level, but it would sure wipe out a region of the country if that thing triggered. So we put out what the documentary was called Holes in Heaven. It came out in 1997. By far the most published and most watched documentary on HAARP ever produced. And since then I've been on History Channel, Science Channel, and I've built these systems and showed them how they work live on TV. So that technology does exist. And I think during the Gulf War in 1991, they actually used it. They bombarded the area for about 60 days with this technology. They gave the people sitting in bunkers dreams and nightmares and kept them awake for days and days and days at a time with this brainwave in training technology. So when the tanks rolled in, they just poured out of the bunkers and threw their hands in the air. They were done. They were already defeated. So this technology does exist. We do use it, but at our own peril, because this technology is very, very dangerous.
Very true. Very true. All right, Woody, any follow-up for Brooks?
That was great. I realized I read about that story with you at the Low Frequency Sound in a book before about HAARP. So it's very interesting. They just brought that back. So how would these people that have this technology be related to help out like the Clintons? Are they the people that are able to get in and take out an Epstein? I'm wondering about the relationship between Clinton crime family level people and these people with this ultra advanced technology.
Well, I don't really know the answer to that. I think the Clintons are about as high as you get in this business because they bought their way in and they were willing to sell their souls to get there. But as I said, I think there's a supernatural component to this that's very old and very powerful, and it has a completely different goal in mind, and that is to capture all of the souls of mankind. And that's a tricky thing. You know, why do people want to rule the world? They don't. They don't want to rule the world. They don't want to feed you 3 meals a day or make sure you're well or make sure you have a place to live. They don't care about that. What they want is for you to choose them as your God.
Mm-hmm. I think you're totally right. All right, Woody, thank you for your call. I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you very much. All right, next caller, you are on the line. Can we get your name?
Alan from Arizona.
Alan, thank you so much for your call. What's your question or comment for Brooks?
Well, I'm a first-time caller and red-pilled a couple years ago, so this is all new to me. And I know there's a lot going on in Antarctica, and I don't know if Brooks knows much about what's going on over there, but is the Admiral Byrd letters legit? Is the documentary says that the aliens are bad, but Admiral Byrd's visit sounded like it wasn't a bad thing, that it was, watch out, we're watching over the world, and we got the nukes handled, and you help take care of the rest. So what do you know about Antarctica?
Fascinating
not much
subject.
about Antarctica. Brad Olson's the expert on Antarctica, but the Arctic is been my area of focus for quite some time. As you know, in 2006, I became a leader of the North Pole Inner Earth Expedition, which was a venture, a scientific venture to investigate the idea that Earth might be hollow. We discovered it when we were researching the ancient cultures. We found this inner Earth life force and several references in things like the Bible and the Vedas and other writings where there are advanced civilizations that live inside the planet. I'm a scientist, I got to have proof. I need some validated, repeatable, measurable information. As it turns out, when we started doing research in the seismology and especially the spectroscopy of measuring the core of the Earth, there's been a tremendous amount of progress made in this respect. And when we couple this with the idea that when we look up at the sky, not every day, I mean, occasionally people look up in the sky, they see UFOs. We know they exist. Every single country on the planet has documented in some way or another that they exist, but we don't know where they park. We don't know if they go out into orbit. They obviously don't land on the White House lawn. There's no intelligent life there. They got to go somewhere. Hundreds of thousands of these craft that fly away from the fastest jets we have, they got to go somewhere. So we have been chasing since 2008 the legend of the Hollow Earth, and it's led us to a region of the Arctic, which is about 4,400 meters deep. This is very, very deep water. And there's only one ship on the planet, one shipping company on the planet that can make it to this region. So we've been trying to put together this scientific venture with Carnegie Science, Stanford University, Washington University, MIT, and Johns Hopkins to take a group of scientists up there and see if we can measure the sea floor to see if there's a vent between the ocean that we sail on and an ocean that's been discovered on the inside of the planet. Yes, there's an ocean on the inside of the planet the size of the Arctic Ocean, and we can see the seismic waves, the waves crashing on a shore on the inside of the crust. So we know that ocean's there. We just don't know how the two oceans connect together.
You know what's interesting? A couple people commenting in the chat, how could the Earth be hollow? I think that people, when they initially hear the idea of a hollow Earth, it's oversimplified. It's just, it's one solid crust on the outside, and then there's a big empty space on the inside. But I think it's probably far more likely that the Earth is not necessarily a solid ball, but more like Swiss cheese. I mean, think about how long it has been in existence. There could easily be many different series of tunnels. I believe down in Central and South America, isn't there quite the network of tunnels that are going between multiple different types of civilizations, from pyramids to pyramids?
Yes, and when you look at the seismology, these are vibrations that occur when there's a big earthquake. the vibrations go through the planet and they're picked up by other seismic listening stations on the other side of the planet. We kind of do a CAT scan of the Earth. Each time this happens, we gain more and more information. We now have software that is able to model what the inside of the planet looks like. So we know that our crust, that is what we live on, all of the mantle, the whole thing we call the crust, is about 900 miles thick. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, it gets very open. No waves propagate through that area. We don't see waves bounce past that area. It goes around it, but not through it. We also have recently, last year, validated a measurement that was made in Japan. It was actually validated by Carnegie Science, that the core of the Earth is putting off a very clean iron signal matrixed with xenon, which makes a lot of sense to us because we have done atmospheric sampling for a century, and we're missing about 90% of the xenon in our atmosphere. It should be there because of the law of partial pressures, but it's not there. Once it goes gaseous, we don't know where it goes. Turns out it's matrixed with iron in the core. Wow. And it creates a stable crystal. We think that crystal is somewhere between 12 and 1,400 miles in diameter, somewhere around 14 grams per cubic centimeter, which makes it very dense. Now, when you take that weight and the weight of the crust and the distance we are from the sun and the amount of time it takes us to go around the sun, there's some mass that needs to be written off because the planet's 7,100 miles thick, or, in diameter. Mm-hmm. If it's all, 1 gram per cubic centimeter or heavier, we're too heavy. Some mass needs to be written off. Turns out there's a gap between the 1,200 mile core and the 900 mile crust. Somewhere in there is an open gap, and that region is probably habitable.
Wow, that's awesome. I had no idea that you were involved in that. That is super cool. Definitely hope that we can get some readings from it in the future. Alan, do you have any follow-ups?
Yeah, since we're on the planet there a little bit, the magnetosphere apparently is going a little wacko. There's big openings here and there. They talk about a polar a shift, and do you have any information maybe if that is in our near future of a magnetic shift?
Well, there's a couple things we know about the magnetic pole shift. One is that it's happened before. The North Pole was once the South Pole because we have igneous rock that has that record in it. What we don't know is how long it takes. We theorized a long time, it takes like 100,000 years. But now we see that this vignette, this is the record that's in the Nordic rock, we see that this event can take place in as short as 30 years. So when we couple that with an effect we know, it's called the Coriolis Effect. This is a force that works at 90 degrees to any rotating body. That's why your bicycle stays up or your motorcycle doesn't fall over. It's the Coriolis Effect. But when you have two rotating bodies, like a crust and a core, rotating on the same axis, that Coriolis effect can begin wobbling. And that's why we see the magnetosphere doing these oscillations. We call them undulations. Once it gets to a certain point, it could roll over. And if it rolls over, our magnetics are going to switch on our planet. Would it be cataclysmic to us? Probably not. Seas are not really going to heave out of their bounds or things like that. But it will be cataclysmic in the sense that insects, birds, and fish will lose their way for a while. They will not be able to recover very quickly because they use this magnetic field for navigation. Mm-hmm. And that is going to directly affect us.
All right.
Will our planes go down?
Not as long as there are pilots flying them. I mean, I don't need instruments to fly an airplane. That's why we were able to land on the moon, because we flew it to the moon. Every other probe that's gone up there, except the Chinese, has splatted into the moon because they're trying to use the gravity of the moon as a constant, and it's not.
Interesting.
So you think a man was on the moon? I've been told that it was a theater by California's best.
So you have.
Stanley Kubrick, yes. Well, here's my take on it. I think that it's pretty likely that we have been to the moon, but it's also highly likely that there was a staged production that was filmed. It seems more likely to me that it was a movie that was shown to us just in case they saw something they didn't want us to see while they were up there. That seems likely to me. But, actually, you bring up a kind of an interesting thread there. One of the largest arguments against man having been to the moon is the existence of the Van Allen radiation belt. As a scientist, what can you say about that? If the Van Allen belt exists, how could man have gotten through it? And especially with the technology we had back in the 60s.
Well, because it comes and goes. And as it turns out, in the 60s, from 69 to about 75, the Van Allen radiation belt, as it does every now and then, it got very weak. And the craft was flying at about 24,000 miles an hour, which meant it was only going to be in it for about 3 minutes. And it was very weak at the time, and they took the risk. They flew through it. Now, they had a lead shield. It was light, but it was enough to protect them for 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, I can buy it.
Does the solar minimum help the Van Allen belt be depleted like we are in now?
It does. And in fact, that solar cycle 24 has had a lot more effects on our planet than the average person's aware of. A lot of people don't know this, but our atmosphere is built by the sun. Cosmic rays and coronal mass ejections and solar flares that come from the sun launch particles out into space, and when they launch toward Earth, they get caught in Earth's gravitational pull and they build up our atmosphere. Solar cycle 24 has been so quiet for so long that our atmosphere is thinning, not a little bit, a lot. So much so that GPS satellites we thought we were going to have to replace 10 years ago are still flying, because they're not dragging against the atmosphere. For us on the surface, it means hotter summers because the infrared radiation can come straight to the ground. It's not dissipated. And in the winter, it means colder winters because our insulative blanket is missing. So our radiation can leak out into space. So we're getting colder winters and hotter summers. It has nothing to do with man's activities. It's all the sun.
All right, Alan, thank you.
One last question I got to ask. The UVCs that are getting into our atmosphere, UVC is not supposed to hit the ground, and it's cooking everything. And my skin just burns when I start getting hit with sun rays now. And is that going to affect us?
It will. It's not UVC, it's UVB. We're not there yet. UVC is somewhere around 320 nanometers. That would be very bad, because you get sterilization of the microbes on the surface of the earth and all our plants would die. But UVB does get through, and in 15 minutes of direct sunshine, you have had an 8-hour supply of ultraviolet radiation. You're exactly right.
All right.
Thank
Alan,
you.
Thank you for your call, brother. Appreciate you calling in.
Thanks, Red Pill. Talk to you later. Bye.
No problem. Peace. All right. Well, Corbin was going to be our next caller, but the microphone is not connecting. So we've got Denise. I believe this is our UK correspondent. And Denise should be here in a second. And I see definitely we had a couple of people in the chat who thinks that we did not go to the moon. By all means, guys, I encourage you to call in and you can talk to Brooks about what his opinion is, and you can give your opinion. And this is supposed to be an open dialogue. So please feel free to call in. So here's a question that I have for you about the lunar landing module. There was a statement made by one of the astronauts that said the walls of the module were so thin that if they were to drop a screwdriver, that it would go through the floor, it would break through. I mean, how is it possible that they would have a spaceship built from such, I guess, flimsy materials?
Well, they had to build it out of aluminum, but it was, of course, gusseted and reinforced. I've seen the lunar module. I've sat in it. It's pretty robust, but when you're at 9 Gs for a moment in time, a screwdriver weighs about 60 pounds.
Okay.
So if you dropped it, it would probably go right through the floor.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got Corbin on the line now. Corbin, hello, and what is your question for Brooks.
Hey, Red Bill, thanks for taking my call. I'm interested if anyone has done any follow-up on those seismic waves that were emanating somewhere near Madagascar that repeated every 17 seconds. Do you remember that a couple years ago?
Yes, I do.
Yes. What was the deal with that?
Well, I think it was being generated by something, and a lot of people think it was a HAARP. But when we triangulated that, it went to an island. At first, at one angle, it looked like it had a big parabolic dish on it. Mm-hmm. It turns out it wasn't. It's just a crater because it's a volcanic island. It's uninhabited. So we're not really sure that was coming from the surface. It may have been coming from underneath the surface. The interesting thing is that the period of it every 17 seconds. That was something that was very anomalous. Hasn't repeated since then, but it got a lot of scientists' attention, let me tell you.
Was that the one that was coming from what appeared to be Rothschild Island down there in Antarctica, near Antarctica?
No, this was toward Madagascar. It seemed to be, you could almost see the waves coming out of it. It started there and went out from almost like a cone from there, like somebody was tapping the planet right there very hard.
There was a couple of different incidents I remember, and the 17-second one, I know that wasn't too long ago, but there was another one a couple of years ago that seemed to be doing the same thing. It was repeating patterned waves that were coming from Rothschild Island down there in Antarctica. Corbin, do you remember that incident?
I don't remember the one near Antarctica Island, the 17-second one near Madagascar.
Okay, all right. Well, any follow-up for Brooks on that?
No, thanks a lot for all you do, Red Bill. We're behind you all the way.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate your call. All right, have a good one. All right, and Denise is next on the line. Denise, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Excellent. What's your question or comment for Brooks?
I've got a couple of questions, and it's just clarification for me. First question is this last space launch a few weeks ago. It just looked iffy to me. There are a couple of things that looked iffy to me. The bit where it was the part that was ejected that came back and supposed to have landed on a raft. The film cut out as it was landing, and then it came back on again after it was already landed.
I noticed that too.
That seemed really strange, and also it seemed to have foil around the engine. How could foil protect a rocket?
Well, by the time that casing comes off, there isn't much atmosphere to deal with. You're up around 80 miles. So when that casing comes off, that insulative foil that's around there is more to reflect solar radiation, keep those instruments from overheating than anything else. So there's a lot of space equipment out there that just has gold or silver foil around it.
Yeah,
I've seen that quite often.
Just foil? There's nothing underneath the foil?
No, there's insulation under it. There's Kelvar under it. There's another type of insulation that's made from non-woven fiber. It's designed to catch what we call salt or really tiny micrometeorites to keep them from actually reaching the electronics. It just slows them down. Bezos is the one that kind of developed this. I'm sorry, Bigelow is the one that developed this, and now layers of that are used on almost all the spacecraft.
That's what I meant. If it was just foil, I couldn't understand how it could protect anything because of the space dust, as you said, that would penetrate it if there was nothing behind it. Kevlar, etc., makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And the other one is I had a holiday once in Turkey, and I went to Cappadocia, and I went down into the vertical city. You can only go down 4 levels now. I went in winter when there was snow on the ground, and I was wearing a thermal jacket. By the time we'd gone down 4 levels, I took my jacket off because I was sweating. The point of this being is, the closer you get towards the middle of the earth, the warmer it gets. So if these places are supposed to be miles under the crust of the earth, and I only went down 4 levels, of a vertical city, and I was sweating. How do you keep cool if you're going down miles?
Well, because the crust of the Earth...
not my brain for me.
The crust of the Earth is 900 miles thick. We have drilled approximately 8 miles into the Earth. That's all the physical samples we have from the crust. Yes, you're right. As you get closer to the center of the crust, the temperature keeps going up. And a lot of energy is stored in the Earth. So as you go down, like, for instance, in a salt mine that's 6,000 feet deep, or a coal mine that's 4,000 feet deep, it's quite warm down there. It can be close to 100 degrees down there, maybe 90 something. Typically, it's about 55 degrees once you get underneath the ground a ways. But in these areas that store a lot of thermal energy, it gets quite hot. I've been under the pyramid in January, and it was 102, 103 degrees, about like it would be in your attic when I was underneath the pyramid. So it stores a lot of energy for a long time. Once you get on the inside of the crust, it would pretty much be the same temperature as our surface is, because the energy is trapped on the inside of the crust. Now you're on the outside of the crust, but you're on the inside of the planet. And instead of having space between you and the core, you have about 800 or 900 miles of atmosphere. That's a lot of insulation.
Anything else for Brooks there, Denise?
No, I slightly unraveled my brain because those two things I couldn't compute. I couldn't get round in my head. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your call. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Night.
Night. All right. Next up, we've got Let's Get Real. Let's Get Real. How's it going?
Hi, I'm doing good, Bill. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. What's your question for Brooks?
I came a little late tonight, but it's Brooks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you kind of beat me to the punch, Red Bill, because I was going to ask about the tunnels, but it's my understanding that they go all over the world and come up in weird places like castles and like the Vatican and have maglev trains.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. I've heard previously that there was some type of interconnecting tunnel system specifically underneath the Vatican. Do you know anything about that? I mean, is there a tunnel system that goes all over the world?
I don't know anything about a tunnel system that size. I've seen tunnel systems before that were man-made, and they're quite incredible. In fact, in the book Charm of Favor, I talk about Site R. Site R is in Pennsylvania. It's not far from Camp David. It was built in 1946. A tremendous amount of money poured into building, hollowing this thing out of a granite mountain. But there's an actual small city under there. There are 5 buildings, 5 multi-story buildings under, water treatment plant, roads, all kinds of stuff under there, and they've still been expanding it. Cheyenne Mountain is very large. There's 500,000 square feet underneath that mountain. But as far as connecting all of them together, I don't know. Now, I've gone to some tunnel systems. I went to Mammoth Cave at least a dozen times trying to flesh out the story of Edidorfa, which is basically Aphrodite spelled backwards. But I met with all of the staff of Mammoth Cave, and I went in it several times. Of course, when you turn the lights out, it is pitch black. To think about a caravan to go into a tunnel with nothing but torches, if those torches go out, you would go insane. It is so black. You would never find your way out. You'd have to carry all the water and all the food that you would need for both directions. I don't think that's very plausible either. Walking 900 miles inside a tunnel is just not practical. Escaping from Vatican City and going 20 miles out of town, totally practical.
Okay. Let's get real. We've got one caller left, and we've got 3 minutes left. So thank you very much for your call.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Have a great night. Okay, great. We're going to go to our last caller of the evening. Caller, you're on the air. Can we get your name?
Oh, hi. Pale Rider.
Pale Rider. Welcome to the program. What's your question or comment for Brooks?
Oh, hey, Red Bill, thanks for having Brooks on. I love listening to him. Brooks, thanks for being here. Love your spiritual comments. Ephesians 6:12, right? That's our situation. So thanks for recognizing that. I just wanted to ask you, I had found the testimony and the scientific paper of Dr. Robert Harrington to be quite convincing related to Planet X. And, since then there were denials from NASA, but there's been, drip in the mainstream media. So I'm just wondering, what is the truth about Planet X?
Well, the only evidence that I'm aware of that I will actually repeat is that we have a system that we use to discover planets we call perturbation theory. And this is where we look at a star and we watch the wobble of the star. And we can tell if there's a planet revolving around that star because of the amount of time and the distance that it's tugged by the planet orbiting it, because gravitation pulls against the sun just like the sun pulls against the planet. Our solar system is built in such a way that most of the time, all of the planets are on one side of the sun. It's just the way the periods work out. They're not evenly scattered around the sun. They're basically all on one side of the sun. What we don't see is the perturbation that should happen because of that. Jupiter and Saturn and Earth and all those planets on one side of the sun, pulling it, it should be wobbling around, but it's not. So what we're aware of is that there's another gravitational body. We don't know how large, but it's got to be pretty big, about 14 times the size of Earth. It has to be on the other side of our planets, other side of the sun than our planets are, to keep the sun from wobbling. And that's all we know. We've not sent anything in that direction to discover anything, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, yeah, in that YouTube video where Zachariah Stitchin's talking to Harrington, he talks, I can't remember if it was Voyager or what, but he says they confirmed its existence. Now, I just wonder, was he misinformation or was he actually telling the truth, and the truth has since been silenced along with him?
I'm a scientist and I take all these personal testimonies in stride because they're direct observations, but I got to have them validated. I need another source that I would consider credible to back up Zachariah's claim. And I don't have it. So I really don't have a comment on that.
Okay. Are you aware, just final question, I know we're running out of time. Were you aware of that paper by Whitmer and Matisse where they concluded that there's a post-Jovian mass in our solar system?
I'm not aware of that, no. I'll look for it, though, now that you've got me cued.
Yeah, I think it was printed in a paper or a journal called Icarus. So anyway, okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your call. Excellent. Have a great night. All right. Let me, before we end, you guys, I just needed to give a couple of quick thank yous. I got 2 donations tonight on Cash App. Alex, thank you very much for that generous donation. And also Lore said, great show as always. Also, Lisa Lady is giving away a couple of Bibles. So I'm going to be putting her Twitter link into the chat. You guys can get a hold of her if you want to go ahead and get one. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. I appreciate it. Brooks, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Excellent stuff that we talked about. I'm really hoping we'll be able to have you back in the future as long as you're willing. And someone in the chat, Robin, had asked why we always have the same callers. Well, I certainly have no control over who decides to call in, and it just happens to be the same people. I encourage you, if you guys want to call into the show, go ahead and do it. That's why I put that stuff up there early, and that's why I have the mods post it over and over and over again. I love when we get a variety of callers because it's a variety of questions and a variety of viewpoints. So, Brooks, thank you once again. Where would you prefer people go to get your book, to get in touch with you, find out more information about you?
The best place is brooksagnew.com. Super simple, just brooksagnew.com. My podcast on Wednesday and Sundays linked there. All the books are linked there. My scientific work is all there, as well as my writings. So
excellent.
You'll stay in touch with everything I'm doing. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come on your program. I'm a big fan.
Well, I really appreciate it. I'm a fan of you as well. It was an honor to have you on the show. I cannot wait until we have you back for another conversation, and we'll be talking along the way, I'm certain. All right, you guys, thanks everybody for being here. Thank you to the mods for keeping the chat comfy. I appreciate all of you. I couldn't do it without you. So please make sure you are here tomorrow Comfy Sunday at 7 p.m. with myself and Methods. We're going to be having the Speaker 2018 and the Sharp Edge. It's going to be a great show. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Good luck, and God